You, Jonathan. Thanks for having me, and thanks to all of you for being here for this discussion. I'm actually really excited about it. A lot of the time, if I'm in the time of the pandemic, most of my talks have been online, and I get 20 minutes, and have to rush right through and get some questions afterwards. So I'm really excited for this format to really, take my time with the topic and for it to be interactive. So thank you for setting up this series, Jonathan. So today I will be talking about deciding on trails. That's the title of my book, but I also believe that communities everywhere face a decision as to whether or not to invest in their trails or embrace their trail systems. It's a decision that we face at the community level as well as the regional level. So before I get into talking, and we're going to be talking mostly about cultivating a trail culture and what that looks and feels like, lots of real examples of trail culture. But before I do that, I just want to go over a couple of assumptions that I'm bringing in to this conversation. So the one is that in trails and tourism, we're selling a few things. We're not selling trails, we're selling experiences. We're selling memories, a sense of place for the people that come off of our trails and into our communities. And we're selling connection and feelings of belonging. So these are the things that we are doing and in the realm of trails and tourism. Another assumption that I'm bringing to this conversation is that we can successfully sell that which we're passionate about. We could also sell that which is authentic and which is part of our local and regional culture. We can sell other things, but I think most of you who are here, as a part of this conversation, are selling and working in this realm. So as for culture, what is culture? That it's important to have a baseline idea as we go into this conversation. Culture involves learned behaviors, customs, attitudes, social institutions, and even achievements of a particular nation, people, or a social group. So, for Canada, you have a national culture, and then you break it down to Atlantic Canada. There's a different culture there. Break it down to your province and into your community. There are different layers of culture, but this is the basics of what it means to have and share culture. The photo on the right, by the way, is from Gros Morne. Whenever I was a participant in GMIST Edge from the Wedge, Edge of or from, I always get that wrong, Jonathan. Not that
Edge of the Wedge, yeah.
Edge of the Wedge. And we were learning to shuck and to prepare lobster. So that's a great example. Food customs and local available foods are representative of culture. So I promise I'm going to get us to trails, but we are talking about trail culture, so we have to talk about culture first. So let's use maple syrup as an example. So my understanding is that maple syrup is produced in 3 of the Atlantic provinces. I'm not so sure that it's produced in Newfoundland and Labrador, correct, Jonathan?
We have a few trees that we definitely tap.
Good. So let's just talk about syrup a little bit. There are lots of other things that are representative of your culture, but I think it's fair to say that this is one of them. And I was doing a workshop in New Brunswick a few years ago, and we had people thinking about the Bay of Fundy story and what does that story look like if you're inviting people to visit the area, if you were writing an article that was going into a tourism publication, what do you write? And I was looking through those responses yesterday, and I noticed that one of the groups talked about maple syrup, and they wrote, and this is as if they were writing for a travel publication: "Here we are in the cool winter air, being drawn to the sweet smell of maple being boiled down in a local sugar camp. We are invited in with the sweet taste of maple sugar and the promise of some maple candy on the fresh snow." So there are maple experiences all throughout Atlantic Canada. Maple festivals. In Moncton, the city actually has its own maple camp that's city run. Farmers market stands, pancake suppers, maple tapping classes. These also are things that happen in Western Pennsylvania, by the way, where I am. But in New Brunswick, in Nova Scotia, I think you have more syrup than we do. So easy to sell, right? Easy to sell these kinds of experiences. What happens though if we want to sell some paper? By comparison, I don't know if any of you watched The Office or have watched The Office. So selling something, going back to this idea of things that you're passionate about, things that are reflective of the culture, it's an easier sell. Selling paper, not so much, right? To make it a little bit more real for you, taking things, customs and products, symbols from other cultures, right? You couldn't easily sell a Hawaiian lei in your area. You couldn't easily sell pottery from the Southwest United States. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that culture and selling things that are reflective of your own, we sell that most naturally and easiest. So I hope that I've convinced you of that as we go into this idea and concept of cultivating a trail culture. If we want people to use and enjoy our trails and to come and have trails be part of a visitor experience or part of a local residence experience, it has to be a part of what we care about. It has to be a part of our day-to-day culture as well. You certainly can have some semblance of a trail economy or an outdoor economy without having this, culture that is sort of like supports that. But it's a whole lot easier whenever you do have it. So one of my main points and what I hope you will take away today is that cultivating a trail culture is what makes a sustainable trail economy possible. It's sure, like I said, you may be able to have some form of a trail economy without it, but it's a whole lot better when you have that culture going for you. So to that point, I wanted to talk about the difference between transactional trail communities and transformational trail communities. There are transactional trail communities and businesses, people in places that see the opportunity in trails. They see something they can sell and they sell it. But you go into some of those towns, where there's not a true appreciation, and you feel that lack of appreciation. We were talking, as we were getting started about the best practice missions. For the mission trips, those places that are more transactional in nature, where there's not a real trail vibe, those are the places we didn't go. I mean, just to be, really direct. Those communities just didn't get put on the itinerary, right? Because there's something missing in those places. As by comparison, this idea of transformational places that really have embraced trails and it's become a part of either their business or their community. Let's use the Savage River Lodge as an example. So Jonathan was talking about the bus that broke down. If you want to have a bus breakdown on a highway, I feel that it broke down in the exact right place at a rest stop with charging stations. We were off the highway. We had a great group of people. If you want to have a bus breakdown, with a certain group of people, I'd prefer it to be Atlantic Canadians. So I learned, but we made our way through that experience, but it was a long, grueling experience on the side of a highway. And we were supposed to that night arrive at the Savage River Lodge, where we would have a really nice meal, and that was our lodging for I think the next 2 nights, and everyone was looking forward to it. Instead, we're stuck on the side of a Maryland highway, and we roll into the Savage River Lodge on a new bus at, I don't know, something like 11 p.m. Everyone was tired. For you, it felt like midnight or 12:30 in the morning. And we get into the lodge, and the lodge by then had been closed, or the restaurant had been closed. The employees had been sent home because the restaurant closes at 9 or 10 p.m. And we see this sign, "Welcome Atlantic Canada," as they were, seems like they were inviting the entire region. But we also see the note that Jonathan referenced, which was, "Please help yourselves, write down what you had." So everyone was able to have a drink or two, sandwich wraps and potato chips. And it was just, sustenance. And I think people were really moved by just like the trusting approach of, welcoming us as best as they could, given the circumstance. So just, a story to speak, I guess, to the idea that there are some businesses and some places that really get and embrace trail users and are excellent in the realm of hospitality. This is one of them. So investing in trails contributes to more vibrant, more delightful, more visitor-ready communities. This picture is in one of the towns along the Great Allegheny Passage. That's the same system, where the Savage River Lodge is, and that's where I got started in trails and tourism. I think it's just important to know that this kind of investment does contribute to your bottom line as a community, which normally is vibrancy. And there is a direct connection. Communities who are striving for this vibrancy and are striving to be a part of the trail economy, usually, what you see is you see a shared vision, locally and regionally, sometimes, at the provincial level, that embraces trails. There's a pursuit of trail networks and connectivity. It seems like it's not enough anymore to have a standalone trail. People are in the trails world are really moving in the direction of trying to connect trails, extend them and connect them to one another so that you have longer networks that people can use. Whenever you have a community trail strategy, it's reflected in things like your planning documents at the municipal level. It's reflected in tourism promotion materials, municipal policies and budgets. And there's one specific tool that Jonathan made reference to, which was the Trail Town program. So Trail Town initiatives, I'm going to talk about. I'm just going to spend a few slides in case some of you came here wanting to know more about that. But it's a community development tool that is used in trail communities. So by way of definition, a trail town is a community through which a trail passes that supports trail users with services, promotes the trail to its residents, and embraces the trail as a resource to be protected and celebrated. What you don't see here is anything about the economy. You don't see anything about economic impact, but it's assumed, and it's a part of it. But there's so much more to it. To be a trail town really is to make the decision to pay attention to trails, bringing us back to this idea of deciding on trails. It's taking the time to do something as simple as sidewalk chalk on your trail, expressing messages of enthusiasm and welcome and celebration. So where did this idea of trail towns come from? In 2007, I was a part of the first Trail Town program. The visionaries for the program started thinking about this in the very early 2000s. And by 2007, they had enough funds to create a program and to hire a staff, and I was a part of that. It was located along the Great Allegheny Passage, which is a rail trail that goes from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to Cumberland, Maryland. We started first in Pennsylvania and then we extended into Maryland. But the program really was designed to help communities along that system to better benefit from the trail, to help them to understand trail user needs and how they can better connect to the trail for economic benefit. So where we were at that time in our thinking, now about 15 years ago, was very much focused on economics. We considered it to be a regional approach to economic development. And I'm happy to say that since then, other trail town programs have been established in other places, and the focus has broadened to become more holistic. So the economic piece is still a part of it, but there's more to it. I mentioned this already, but it was to us a regional approach to rural economic development. That showed in the economic figures. These are in US dollars. But we measured the economic impact. Before the program was created and before the trail was even complete, there was a somewhat disappointing economic impact study. That was the one you see there from 2002. By 2008, that impact had jumped up to $40 million. And another 4 years later, up to $50 million. There were a lot of reasons for that. But this is just, to give you an idea for what's possible economically speaking in the world of trails. There's a new study that should be out any day now that's going to show even increased economic benefit, by the way. Also, this is a group from one of the best practice missions. I think this may have been 2016. So to me, the Trail Town story becomes a lot more interesting whenever trail advocates and community advocates in other places, get wind of the idea and they decide to create their own programs. The Appalachian Trail Conservancy was one of the first. So they took this idea that we had for communities and along a 150-mile rail trail, and they applied it to a 2,200-mile footpath. They have 50 communities across 8 or more states. And, there are programs all over the place. There are, at least a dozen or more programs. These are just some of them. And the one in the middle on the bottom row is is actually Canada's first Trail Town program. There's a Trail Town presence in at least 28 states, as well as in Ontario. Anything green on the map here is a place that has a Trail Town presence. And I mentioned the one in Ontario. It's located along the Trent Severn Waterway. So they took an idea that started, with land trails and applied it to a waterway. So it's a concept that can be adapted in a lot of different ways. And, what they're doing with their program is they're doing tourism. This is from a screenshot from their homepage. I actually helped with this program, by the way. But these are 6 of the 9 communities, and they're helping people to plan their trips. People who are visiting the Trent Severn Waterway, they're assisting them in figuring out how to come into the communities for services and for enjoyment. So a little bit on the book. I titled it Deciding on Trails, 7 Practices of Healthy Trail Towns. In the book, what I do is I talk about the history and evolution of this idea of trail towns. And then I move into best practices that communities can follow. And just to frame it a little bit further, we're here today to talk about one of those 7 best practices. If you're looking at this list of 7 practices, the 4th is to cultivate a trail culture. And that's sort of like what we're talking about today. But the practices you can see here, they are all interwoven. And the cultivating a trail culture shows up in all of the others. I consider it to be the bedrock best practice that trail communities, ought to be following. So I can't show this slide without telling you about this bridge. This is the High Trestle Trail Bridge in Iowa. It is in rural Iowa, central part of the state, and the trail is a 24-mile trail, so not a very long trail in terms of cycling trail goes. But what they did with this bridge was they made the trail a destination. Because they could have put any bridge here to span the Des Moines River Valley, but instead they did this epic work of art. You can see that it's like really a spectacular bridge. They light it by night, the different arches in the center, so that it becomes a destination by day and by night. And they also are honoring their local heritage, getting back to this idea of culture. The steel arches that you see are representative of the cribbings that you would have seen in an underground coal mine, which was, former industry in that area. So they did a whole lot with this bridge, and it's a great example of what's possible. And if you get off of the bridge, go about a mile down the trail, you get to the town of Madrid, Iowa. And you can see here with their wayfinding signage that they are honoring that bridge in the shape of the top of the sign, right? So there's a whole lot going on here in terms of the trail community deciding to, first of all, invite people off of the trail into town. And they're doing it in a way that is really connecting to the trail and to that bridge. So this is the part of the presentation where I start to get into just some examples of trail culture showing up in different places. So it kind of sort of feels like show and tell to me. But one I wanted to share with you was in Champaign County, Illinois. There's another trail that's about a similar distance, about 25 miles long. It's called the Kickapoo Rail Trail. That's the Kickapoo, and in the photo on the left, this is an area that is, farming area, lots of corn and soy, and the trail actually goes past a lot of farm properties. They have interpretation that connects to that part of their heritage and culture. They do other fun things. It's not just interpretation. If you see the picture on the right, this is in one of their county forest preserves. They have these little painted Despicable Me minions. I might be getting that wrong, but they put them out every spring, and it's sort of like an egg hunt, and families get out. People that normally might not go out to the park go out because they've found a way to meet people where they are and to embrace kids and families based on their interests. So also along the Kickapoo, this is a shop owner of a little coffee shop and bike shop in Urbana, Illinois, which is a highly populated university town. And whenever you go into the shop, you see a trail map on the wall. That's the picture of the right. And on the trail map, there's this note that says, follow it all the way to the wheelhouse. So follow the trail to the wheelhouse. The wheelhouse is located about 10 miles away in a very small community. Probably only, 500 people live there. So you have this urban center pushing people out to a rural community. And when you get to the wheelhouse, this is what you find. Not only do they have great culinary with farm to table foods, but they are located right along the trail. And this is what I call put a bike on it. They just have bikes all over the place, wheels. They're really, really leaning into the trail. Along the Great Allegheny Passage, I just have some more examples for you here. Anyone that's been on a best practice mission may have seen the image on the left. It's really hard in the town of Frostburg to draw people in the town. Frostburg is called the Mountain City, and you have to go about a mile up the mountain to get from the trail to town. Tough sell, right? It's easier to keep going downhill to the next community. So what they did in Frostburg was they created these switchbacks to make it a little bit easier for people to get up the mountain. And they put interpretive panels and banners and these really great bike themed sculptures that draw people in. I think that public art does a lot of heavy lifting for our communities. It's a vibrancy indicator, and also if it's properly positioned between trail and town, it does help to lure people toward your community or people from your community out to your trail. Also along the gap in the town of Connellsville, I worked on a project this summer. This is one of the bikes from it. I'll tell you more about the project in a second, but this bike was spray painted and turned into a planter by the local garden club, and they did 4 other bikes like it. So to me, whenever you have the local garden club doing something like this with old bikes, that is indicative of culture. So as for what we were doing in Connellsville, we did a vintage bike display. We called it Bananas for Bikes, inspired by the banana seat style bicycle. And this is just some of our art created by a college student. And we had 30 bikes, vintage and unique cycles all around town, 20 different locations. And the whole point was, instead of having people pass right through the community, to have them move around town looking at the different bikes. So they do that for their own interest, but what they pick up on is this town is excited about this trail. This town is excited about bikes. They're doing something interesting. These are some more shots from Connellsville. You saw that bike already. On the lower left, that's Demetrius Morgan. He was the college student that lived in another town, did the artwork, came with his family to see his artwork and to see the bikes. In the upper left is a local resident who we had out on weekends doing chalk art and chalk messaging, inviting people into the community. And a lot of the time she was making reference to, vintage bikes this way, that sort of thing. So crossover between two different promotions. Activating a trail culture. Let me back up a little bit. I'm going to wait to talk about activating, but this is the group in Connellsville. Again, what we did was we had the exhibit. It was self-guided throughout the season, but on one night we organized walking tours. So we would take people around and show them the bikes and do the interpretation. And when you get people together in your community to take a walk like this together, that is something that you're doing to cultivate a trail culture. Trail culture also shows up in signs, sandwich boards and signs along the trail telling people there's free water here. A lot of this stuff is very simple. There are real investments that you need to make as related to your trails, but a lot of the things that you can do are simple, easy, affordable things. Restaurant menus are, sometimes you see bikes and trails honored in those ways, and even in restaurant names and bike shop names, cafe, brewery names. And I mentioned put a bike on it. Again, there's this idea of, visually showing people that you're excited about bikes or hiking or canoeing, whatever the thing is. And it shows up throughout your community, on the sides of buildings and bikes propped up in storefronts. So I have a few images from Atlantic Canada. In the town of Riverview, there's a winter carnival. And I don't know if any of you are involved in that or have been to it, but it's a multi-day event. And this, to me, the carnival is a great example of activating trails. I think, activating or programming trails with events and activities is a way to jumpstart a trail culture. And what they do with the winter carnival is one night they have a date night, and the date night includes, a walk on the trail, drinks and snacks around this fire, and they have the great toboggan decorations, and they really get people out in the dead of winter onto a trail, which is not something that happens in all places. This is a great example of activating a trail. Or in Nova Scotia in Pictou County, Sally O'Neill is a friend of mine, and she's been on some of the mission trips and or one of the mission trips, and she has organized a rainbow community that does walks on the trails. So this is the LGBTQ plus community trying to expand who is using our trails. And one thing that they do is they call it a walk instead of a hike. It makes it a little bit more accessible to people. There's that simpler, more inviting language. It's just going out for a walk, right? This is a paper bike in a storefront in Halifax, part of Bike Week there. And to the right, a lot of you may be familiar with Bike and Bean Cafe, repurposing an old train station along a bike trail. All of what I've just shown you are examples of cultivating a trail culture. And if we were to just organize what you just saw, to cultivate a trail culture, it looks like, first of all, us using trails personally, activating trails with programs and events, supporting trails in our municipal planning, in our budgets, in our policies, putting a bike on it, which is the fun, part of the fun part of expressing support for trails, extending an invitation to trail users to come off of the trail into our communities, and for townspeople to come out onto the trails, and depicting trails and cycles, canoes, you name it, on our restaurant menus, in the names of our businesses, on our merchandising, visitor packages and itineraries. These are some of the ways that you cultivate a trail culture. So this actually brings me to the end of the PowerPoint. This is a screenshot from my website. I think, the reason I do all of this is because I think trails are good for communities and the people who live in them. And one of the most rewarding parts of my work is having what is now an international community. I know people throughout the United States and Canada who care about trails and care about their places. And if you want to stay connected, you can go to my website, cycleforward.org, just to connect with me on Facebook and to follow my blog, that sort of thing. I think that this broader community has been so important to me and to some of you who I know. So that's just my little plug for staying connected. So all of that being said, I think we are ready for discussion.
Amy, any final thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think one thing that we learned during the pandemic was I assume, I think this is probably pretty universal. Like, people were being told to use their close to home trails, early in 2020, not to travel for trail use. And so along a lot of destination trails, there was that really hurt trail businesses. Bike shops were doing the best business they ever did, but the accommodations and the shuttlers and other businesses were hurting because people were canceling trips. And I think we were reminded in that time of how important it is to make sure that our local residents are activating trails and using them, and it's a part of their daily lives. And so, like, the trail economy is wonderful. We all want to be a part of it, but I just encourage everyone to take a holistic look at trails and to make sure that you're inviting your local residents to use them and to be part of the conversation.
Thank you, Amy, for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. It's always a pleasure to have somebody with the level of knowledge that you have, and that's why we continuously reach out to you to I think help guide some of our thinking and some of our approaches.